Okay, so in this next video, what we're going to be talking about is what specifically happens when the good probiotics are destroyed. So taking us back again to just this normal picture, I just want to remind you, again, the good, healthy gut has got lots of green probiotics. They're not really green, but it's got the probiotics, which secrete this big old blue mucousy gunk, which protects all of the finger villi, and more importantly, it protects the immune system. If your villi are healthy, your immune system is healthy. If your villi is destroyed, your immune system is destroyed. That's the connection between the probiotics, the good gut environment, and your health. Okay, so moving along, let's see what starts to happen. I'm actually going to move forward to this one. As you can see in this picture, you have a lot of various bacteria and you have yeast. The bacteria are the blue structures. Here's the pointer. The bacteria are the blue structures and the white ones are the yeast. You also have the gray ones. Either way, they're all pretty much the bad bacteria. And as you can see, the green layer of probiotics is gone. So as the infections have eaten away at the probiotic layer, now the mucus is also going to start degrading. And as that happens, the fingers are going to become exposed to these various toxins, environmental, food, bacterial, etc. So you can see that the bacteria specifically here is starting to munch away or destroy that villi. Here is a villi that is pretty much destroyed. Once you start getting destruction, absorption doesn't take place. You can see that there's an opening right along here. Okay, so now food no longer has to be absorbed or be digested before it gets absorbed. Instead, it can pass right through the break in the villi and go right to the gut and right to your immune system. So whole pieces of food end up in your circulatory system. And it's not just food. Bacteria, if it's small enough, can be getting in. Strands of bacteria, strains of yeast can get in and become systemic throughout your whole body then. But then the red that's taking place here, this indicates an immune response or a reaction, inflammation. And once you start having that inflammation, it's like battleground. And that battleground then creates a very destructive atmosphere, and the other fingers are very easily destroyed. So moving on, this is kind of what it looks like from the side. Let me get my cursor working. Okay, over here, what we have is a good, healthy villi, and again, over time with them being destroyed from a lack of probiotics, you can see that the villi start disintegrating, and therefore you have a big old reaction, the inflammation. In this picture right here, all the white that is along there is the yeast overgrowing. So more often than not, one of the very first signs of a lack of probiotics in your gut is a yeast infection, and most people tend to think of this as something that only women experience. It is not true. Both men and women have yeast infections in their guts. It comes out in different ways. It can come out as a coating on your tongue. When infants are born with thrush, that's an indication that mom did not have probiotics to give the baby. Instead, her gut looked like this picture. She gave her baby a bunch of yeast molecules rather than the probiotic molecules, and that's what the thrush is in the baby's mouth. Also, when infants get a lot of cradle cap, the cradle cap is also an indication of a yeast infection that was passed on from mom. You can understand or know that you have a yeast infection based on if you have a lot of itchy skin. Itchy skin and eczema is usually an indication of an overgrowth of yeast both in men and women, and the eczema can come out in various ways. If somebody is heavy or overweight and where their skin folds over, if they get the red crevices in between the folds of skin that are also very inflammatory or itchy or just hot or hurt, that usually is yeast coming out in the skin. So yeast can come out in a lot of different ways. It doesn't necessarily just have to be your typical yeast infections. So you can also see down here, this picture is a normal gut. You can see fingers that are standing up very clearly. However, when the gut has been compromised and the villi start disintegrating, this picture you can see there's pretty much a flattened gut. There's no fingers. That also means there's no immune system, which is more important to remember. Here's some more pictures of which you can see specifically up here. good healthy fingers, again, they have been destroyed by bacteria and food toxins simply because there's not enough probiotics to keep them healthy. This one is a better picture. I love this picture because the fact that you can see in the normal healthy one, you've got your circulatory system going up there and you have your lacteal, your immune system. But notice as soon as the finger disintegrates over in this picture, you don't see either. So without a circulatory system, right away that tells you your food's not even getting absorbed into your circulatory system, so you will be deficient in vitamins and minerals. Eventually, you end up with malabsorption, anemia, things like that. But also notice there is no immune system. So people who have a lack of good probiotics in their gut and have damaged their gut lining pretty much have damaged their immune system. This leaves them very predisposed to a lot of health conditions. Not just your basic infections like colds and the flu, but anything that relies on a good, strong immune system to be able to fight it. Cancer is one. Your immune system, all of us have cancer cells, but it's our immune system that kills off cancer cells or tumor cells in their initial stages so that it doesn't become full-blown cancer. When you have a disintegrated immune system, you are much more likely to end up with cancer because you don't have those killer cells, that immune system there to fight it right away. So those are just some pictures. Moving along here. What are some of the results of this? Cancer I just mentioned. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and irritable bowel disease, these go hand in hand with the GERD, the peptic ulcers, and any digestive issue. Whenever somebody presents with, say, a chronic stomach ache, a lot of heartburn, indigestion in general, IBS, which is kind of where it's a condition in which somebody's bowels or their colon is very spastic, and so they might have periods of which if they get stressed or something happens or they don't eat exactly right, certain elements will trigger a response, and so they'll end up with either a lot of diarrhea or else a lot of constipation or just something going on there. Any digestive issue starts with a lack of probiotics, because if you have a good healthy dosage of probiotics and good healthy fingers, it really wards off a lot of your digestive ailments. Anemia we had talked about already too. If you end up with malnutrition, in other words, there are no fingers, the fingers are flattened right down, then there's nothing can absorb. Even nutrients can't absorb. So it doesn't matter if they did get digested, which they really don't, but even if they did, there's nowhere for them to go. So they just bounce all over. I'll show that to you in a minute in a movie. So malnutrition and anemia are two signs of a lack of probiotics, or really just destruction of the gut lining. An increase in food allergies. Maybe you never had food allergies and suddenly you start getting eczema, you start getting all these signs and symptoms of food allergies. Often that will happen in adults. Adults will start living a lifestyle that kills off their probiotics and suddenly they develop food allergies. That's usually why. They're not permanent. Once you fix the gut, then the food allergies will go away, but it is a temporary response to a messed up small intestine, no villi. Autoimmune conditions. Okay, these are conditions in which the immune system no longer knows a foreign object from your real body, and so it starts to attack you. When you end up with a gut that looks, let's go back to, in fact, I think I have a picture coming up that looks like this. What ends up happening is with all the food particles going in and the inflammation happening, the immune system starts to get confused. It doesn't know friend from foe. And so you might have food particles coming in that originally it said, oh, whoa, that definitely is a foe. We need to get rid of that. But now, hey, that food particle that we're not used to seeing looks an awful lot like that pancreatic cell. And so if there's any kind of similarity, and there are similarities that happen, then suddenly the immune system will turn itself and will start attacking your body. And so various autoimmune conditions will suddenly arise as a result of food allergens because of initially a compromised gut lining. And so the food was getting in the first place when it shouldn't have been. Schizophrenia and the other mental conditions, we talked about that later on. Again, it comes from this whole scenario. We call this leaky gut, by the way. The reason why we call it leaky gut is because when the villi get damaged, the gut is now leaky and it allows things into your bloodstream in your body that typically would not be allowed in. Usually the probiotics and the mucus layer would have kept all that stuff out. It would have passed through, you would have excreted it, and it would never have come in contact with your organ systems. But when the gut becomes leaky and allows a lot of different things through, then now it's in your circulatory system and it circulates all throughout your body. The problem is that, especially with a lot of food proteins, they cross that blood-brain barrier, they hook onto receptors in your brain, and they produce responses. So whether it be, I had discussed earlier, an opiate type response, it signals pleasure, and so then it creates an addiction and a craving to those things. Otherwise, it can create a loss of memory. It can create a loss of recall. It can create overall a very foggy feeling. You just don't feel like your brain is working very sharp at all. And a lot of times that is because it's just getting too clogged up, if you will, with undigested food and particles and bacteria and stuff that's leaking into your gut that's not supposed to be. It was supposed to be excreted from having a good mucus layer and a good probiotic lining, and that's gone now. So your body is exposed to a lot of different elements. This is often seen in celiacs. In fact, I had a friend whose mom did not know that she had a severe food allergy to corn and wheat and beef and a lot of different things. She developed leaky gut, basically from a high sugar, low fiber diet. After developing leaky gut, they started thinking that she was getting Alzheimer's. She was doing crazy things that would be out of ordinary for her. As soon as they started eliminating allergenic foods from her diet, it all went away. So it wasn't Alzheimer's at all. It was just simply food reacting with certain particles in her brain or hooking onto receptors and causing responses that were a lot like an Alzheimer's patient would have. So that can happen too. Schizophrenia and a lot of other things are very, very similar. ADD and ADHD in children and autism in children. These are on the rise. And what is our standard protocol? Stick them on Ritalin, stick them on Adderall, stick them on some kind of a drug. More often than not, ADD and ADHD and autism, things that we consider on the spectrum, there's a whole big spectrum of behavioral type issues in children nowadays. Autism is a far right spectrum. You might have a far left too, just a very little amount of hyperactivity. But in either case, anywhere along the spectrum, a child who has behavioral issues, it can almost always be traced back to a lack of probiotics in their gut, an immune system that is not functioning properly, food allergens. It all becomes meshed together. And so the heart of it, though, is a compromised gut, a leaky gut. You fix the gut, the behavioral issues fix themselves a lot of times too. So I would really submit that, especially with the increase in ADD and ADHD and hyperactivity, there are some true cases in which it is a chemical deficiency, but very few. Far more are due to a bad diet. Cancer, I think we talked about. These are just a couple of the biggies. I literally could go on and on and on with how many health conditions are a result ultimately of a bad gut. You fix the gut first and you will fix health. Celiac disease is something that we will talk about in the slides particularly. I think you will read about it a little bit in your textbook too, but please do go over the slides with regards to some individual or some specific elements of each of these conditions in which I will go through them. Celiac is becoming a more and more prevalent condition, and what that is an allergy to gluten. And so you might have heard of this big old fad with gluten-free foods. There's a couple elements here. Celiac is a very true autoimmune condition of which somebody who eats gluten, which is a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye, will react in an anaphylactic way. And so what that means is within seconds they will react to having eaten that protein. That is a true celiac. A larger percentage of the population, though, is what we consider gluten intolerant. So what that means is they can eat gluten and they will not experience an immediate reaction, but over the course of time, it does aid in destructing their villi or destroying their villi. And so because of that, we're seeing more and more people benefiting from simply staying away from the gluten. The reason why gluten is becoming more of an issue today is because we have hybridized our wheat. So the protein element or the gluten element of our wheat now is like 17 times greater than what it ever used to be. So we're getting a lot more of it. And there's wheat in almost all of our food if it's processed food. So not only has the wheat changed, but now we're eating a lot more of that particular food too. So the gluten-free fad, if you will, is not really a fad. There is a lot of truth to it. There's a lot of people that benefit from staying away from it. And the whole cause of that is the leaky gut here. Gluten is one of those molecules that almost always in people causes some amount of a leaky gut. You remove the gluten and a lot of things will end up clearing up. So don't think that if somebody says that they're gluten-free that, oh, they're just, trying to be cool or something. That's truly not the case. Now, I will say on the other side of that, food manufacturing companies have caught on to the fact that if something says gluten-free, it's more likely to sell, or people think, oh, wow, that's gluten-free, I can go eat it. So they'll start labeling meat gluten-free. Meat has always been gluten-free. It's not a wheat-based product, but they're taking advantage of the labeling for the purposes of marketing and for sales, which is not always an advantage to us. Also, you're starting to see a lot of gluten-free products out on the market, but they are no different from white refined glutinous processed foods. They're not healthy. There's no stitch of fiber or health in them. They're just simply processed gluten-free items now. So just because something says gluten-free does not make it healthy either. I do need to clarify that. What I would like to do is show you a quick film. It is on celiacs and what celiacs does, but I want you to think much broader. This is not just celiacs. This is any case in which the gut has become compromised for any of the reasons we listed in the previous lecture. This can happen to your gut. So take a look and enjoy.
In celiac disease, a protein in wheat, barley, and rye called gluten triggers destruction of tiny hair-like protrusions called villi in the small intestine. Normally, villi allow vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients to be absorbed through the wall of the small intestine into the bloodstream. In celiac disease, gluten triggers the immune system to damage or destroy the villi. Instead of being absorbed, fats, proteins, minerals, and vitamins are eliminated in the stool. Decreased absorption of nutrients, or malabsorption, can cause malnutrition and other long-term problems.
Okay, so that should have given you a very good picture as to how easily and how quickly the villi will disintegrate. This will be the last mini lecture for this particular module, but I know many students at this point in time ask, well, how do I fix a gut that is out of order? Because yes, most of America's or Americans do have guts that are out of order. They don't have good, healthy villi. Our diets just naturally predispose us to a very poor gut environment.